Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I don't know if where you're located, but if you're hearing this and you are anywhere in the Midwest, what happened to fall? Fall no longer exists. We go directly from summer to the winter temperatures.
Come on, it's only like in the 40s, dude, in the morning. Come on.
Mark,
we'll be back up there next week.
Mark, it is absolutely ridiculously cold out there. What's going on, brother Vedantha Prasad from India? He's watching from India. He's actually from
Welcome.
yeah.
Welcome.
And so, hey, it's good. We haven't had an opportunity to catch up, so I'm glad you're tuning in today for United Shades of Gray. But you guys think these temperatures are normal? See, this is
fall.
This is a classic conversation.
At night,
they got
50s.
me sitting in this studio with these two white dudes talking about this is great weather.
Wait a minute, time out.
I'm a brother. I'm a tropical person. I love my
grew up in
temperatures
Hawaii,
high and tight.
Come on.
In the 80s,
Yeah.
in the 90s. I honestly, people were talking about how hot it was this summer. And the reality of the situation is when it was at 95, I was like in my special place.
You need to move then,
man. I really do. I think that I need to get back below this snow belt that we have here in Michigan. But hey, I digress. But I do want to say that these temperatures, as soon as September, is it crazy how September 22nd comes, the first day of fall, and the bottom falls out of it was 85 degrees the day before.
That's Michigan this time.
It was 85 degrees on the 21st.
Tomorrow. Who knows?
And then on the 22nd, here we are. It's
50s.
50s.
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to be the 30s tonight.
Yep.
I mean, that is too big of a change. Too
28
quick
in some parts of the state.
Yeah. This brother needs a little bit more air, more warmer temperatures out there. I don't know about you all, but as we talk about it, I am one of them people. I am classically a black man. If I want to see the snow fall, I wish we could create ways that it could fall and it only fall on the grass and not on the streets and the sidewalks. I only want to deal with the snow when I decide I am adventurous to go skiing or.
Wait a minute, that's something I've got to see.
Oh, bro,
Kareem
come on!
barreling down the hill on a ski.
I am an athlete.
Wow.
You already know this. I'm a black man, so you know we athletic.
Well,
right?
that's a stereotype.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Is it a stereotype? Because when I look at tennis, when I look at hockey, when I look at football, when I look at basketball, there's a pattern that's there. We have some exceptional athletic abilities.
Where are you looking at hockey?
Hey, we had that one black guy that played hockey. It was really good. Hey, leave me alone. But the fact of the matter is, we're just joking here for those of you who are listening. Like, this dude is on one. Yeah, I am one. It's the weather. But I'm glad to be here with you guys. Nestled, nice and toasty on the inside of the studio. We got a great show carved out for those who are going to be listening. Thank you for those who are tuning in via social media. I'm not sure exactly which platform. I can see where you guys are coming from. You guys are coming from my personal page. Let's go out there. Let's like these other pages. Let's go to YouTube. I Grow Daily. Let's like, tag, and share this conversation. This is going to be an interesting one. Both one for those who are antiquers. Mark, I know
I'm an antiquer.
You're an antiquer. We talked about his Chicago finds and how he went out there and he was finding little white men. I was like, where is this? You white Santa. I was like, where's the black Santa?
They have them.
Mark was like, I started
Kevin
to get one, but I thought
our guest
maybe
today
not.
will tell you all about them.
But anyways, so we have a great guest who is, I think he's an exceptional talent when it comes to finding these things and really putting together the stories about what we're going to talk about. But before we get about that, we're going to talk about what's hot off the press is this Hurricane Ian is, as we are speaking, and I've kind of been glued to the TV. I am kind of a weather person. I love to see weather, and especially just, it's amazing how these storms create from a depression to a Category 4 hurricane. Our prayers are with those individuals that are in South Florida here in the U.S. because we are seeing probably what is one of the most once in a lifetime kind of storm.
Had a lot of those events lately.
I mean, it's crazy. We've been talking about how this global warming and everything was affecting the weather and affecting, how often and severe the weather is. And this particular storm was supposed to kind of become a Category 4 and then kind of go to a category 3 and hit. But we see that this thing has gone from a category 4 and it's just 2 degrees or 2, what do you call it, miles per hour from being a category 5 storm.
Wow.
This is a serious storm. And the crazy thing about it is that I was actually planning to be in Naples, not Naples, but Fort
Meyer,
Port Coral Harbor. What is it?
Cape Coral.
I'm thinking Pearl Harbor. Cape Coral. Thank
Yeah.
you. I was actually planning on being in Cape Coral next week. And, I'm looking at this, and it's funny because this thing took Cape Coral is taking a direct hit, and they're expecting, can you imagine a storm surge of 12 to 16 feet? They're talking about, anywhere from, 6 to 8 feet above the ground with water. This is horrific. And I got friends and family and folks who are out there who are from that area. So our prayers are with them. And I think power has gone out in some areas. So the worst is the worst is yet ahead, and we're going to keep our eyes focused on that. But I'm going to turn the page. We'll keep your eyes on Cape Coral. We will continue to hope that the best for them. Hopefully by the time that this airs on the radio, if you're hearing this, things have not been as worse as they're being forecast. Hopefully there's some sensationalism to get people glued to the TV.
Can change quickly.
Very quickly. So we're hoping that happens.
Lessons.
So that's one thing, but Mark is getting all his black card punches all in his first year of spending time with me here at United Shades of Gray. And Mark, you've been there before, but
I've been there one other time, way back, probably 2017.
Yeah, so we were both invited to be special guests by a mutual friend at the national or the local Saginaw County version of the NAACP Freedom Fund banquet, which is really their largest fundraiser that they put together. It's a membership drive as well. Mark, what was your takeaway from?
Nice event, very well attended.
500 plus people. Yeah.
It was a nice event in the sense that they recognized, I think,
everybody who happens to be black this side. No,
well, I didn't say that.
No, actually,
there was a few people again, I think the people that had I guess they were a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah, those were nice.
I thought those were really special because they really talked about their personal journey through their life and all the things.
And they gave all of their accomplishments.
Right. Which I don't, when you're 70 something
and you're looking back at life.
Yeah.
And the key thing is, Mark, to your point, these guys have really been change agents.
They have. And so I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that part of the show.
Eugene Seals, Dr. Eugene Seals. Now I'm going to take these two guys, Dr. Eugene Seals and the other individual was John Pugh.
Yeah.
Growing up as a young man and seeing these were when I share with you that there are only a few black men that I saw that were in education or a few black men that were involved in school systems. These were those guys. If I can say that there were maybe 3 or 4 in my life, these were 2 of the 3 or 4. Yeah. So when we say that they're very well, they're great candidates for those types of achievement. These are those guys. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Pugh, who is absolutely one of my favorite people on the planet, I remember him when I was probably in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around there. But him just coming in and being so active and involved in his children's lives. When I got to high school, he had began to sub in the school systems. And just he was like the first black man that I had seen coming into the schools wearing a suit, challenging us to take our education seriously, all of these great things. And so it is always an honor. And then I began to see him as I kind of got older, coming into communities and standing up for those who were disenfranchised or underserved and making sure things were happening. And so I love him. And then the story of Dr. Seals at 42 years old.
Yeah.
You decide, you know what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to med school. At 42, he finishes it. He does it. He starts a practice. He challenges his daughter to do it. They're practicing together. Yep. She's now the chief actual practicing officer for our Saginaw County was it Department of Health, Community
I think
Health?
so. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's
I
what
mean,
it
so
was.
it's phenomenal individuals.
Yep.
And
You
so I
could
was
see the respect of everybody in the room for those two men.
for sure.
Yeah.
If you did not have respect for those two individuals, and that's what I think, when I look at the freedom, this particular dinner, this is what this encapsulates. We talk about history, we talk about those who are making an impact. Our guest that is on here today was one of the young professionals that was recognized, and I want to really get to his story because what he does is something that I think every community needs. There's something in Africa that there's a term called a griot. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
All right. There's also a media outlet called the griot. But a griot is an individual who, in African culture, he was responsible, or this individual was responsible for keeping an oral tradition of the history. So everything that existed, they would take this history and they would commit it to their memory, and they would share it with the next generation, and they would pass it down through the griots. And what I see our guest doing on today is really capturing that history, and I'm excited about it. So you were also there as well, John. You were on a mission helping me to accomplish some things. But what did you think?
I didn't see Jonathan. I went looking for you guys. I couldn't find you.
We don't let the white people just run around at our particular banquets. So we had him in his corner. No, I'm just joking. America. If you're listening, that was for entertainment purposes only. John was actually working, and there's something that we're still working on in terms of putting out a piece, a show, as well as some things that I think that they'll be able to use as they move forward. So I thank you, John, for investing your time for the NAACP. We want to thank you. Do it. All right, so let's get right to what I'm sure Mark is really excited about. Those of you who are listening, I want to thank you guys for continually tuning in. I want you to share, tag, and share this conversation with your listeners, and those who are down there in Joliet, Illinois, at WJOL 1340 AM, Chi-Town. Y'all got to watch Blactiquing Chicago. That's where that comes from. But anyway, if you are in that market, this conversation is probably going to be really exciting for you as well, because I think there is a great, I was looking, and there's a great interest in the Chicago area about reclaiming history. So this could be a really good conversation. So we want to bring, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to bring the man of the hour to the stage. And I have the pleasure of saying that this is a friend. He is somebody that I knew when we were both, I was about to say young, nappy-headed kids, but we were not. We are learning that we were young, dark-skinned, kinky-haired kids. And he's gonna correct me. We had kinky hair growing up. I had good hair. I was, Becky with the good hair from my neighborhood.
When did you? Is Kevin your age, or is
Kevin is generally my age. I'm actually
he's a little younger than you.
I'm actually the age of his older brother.
That's what I thought.
Let's bring Kevin in the conversation.
What years were these? Out of curiosity.
These were the young years, the old school days. That's what they were.
80s or 70s? What are we talking about here?
What's going on? We have now with us in the social media stream, and those of you who are listening to it, Mark, you're not going to do me that way. We want to thank you, Kevin Jones. You're with us here today. Thank you for being here at United Shades of Gray.
Thank you very much. It's so exciting to be here and to see you all again from this past weekend at the NAACP Awards Banquet.
Yeah, so I know, Kevin, that your intention was to be here with us in studio, and we probably would have had too much fun if we added you to the mix with Mark and I and John in the studio. So it's probably for our own good that you weren't able to come. But we're just going to ask, because I know that you were there for a family emergency. How is your family doing? How are things progressing? And when are you getting back on another bird?
So I am in Tacoma, Washington, right outside Seattle. And my brother is doing much better. And so very excited for his health. Thank you all for the prayers. I'll probably stay with him for a couple more days just to make sure things are good with him and my nephews. Then I'll be back in Michigan.
Really. Is he in the military by chance?
What's that?
Is he in the military by chance?
He was. He as of 2 weeks ago, he's no longer in the military. So he's
camp, the big base there.
Yes.
Yeah, my son was stationed there actually for a few years.
Really?
Yeah.
Kids, you have Mark. You have kids who actually did military service.
My oldest son's a major in the Army. He's almost a lieutenant colonel.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Where are you keep Mark? Every single time we get on air, you throw these things out here and just kind of catch me off guard.
When he said Tacoma, I had a suspicion that.
John, here we are, and in our conversations, thinking that Mark is just raising some pretentious, very wealthy kids in Midland, and he's got kids who are actually out there serving our nation.
Yes.
Mark, thank you so much. You my man.
All right.
All
He
right.
had a tour of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, active wartime duty.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah.
All right. So, Kev, we want to thank you for being here today. And Kevin is, I think you have coined the word. I'm not sure
You should TM it if he hasn't.
I mean, hey, we might have to put a trademark on this.
Yeah.
I'm sure, knowing my man, he has done the work. But I want to, why don't you just share? There is a word, Blactiquing, and I spell it word different every single time. I want to put all black in there, B-L-A-C-K teaking. But I looked at the way that you have spelled it, and I've tried to make sure that I mimic that over and over again. I want you to share, Kevin, in your own words, what is Blactiquing, so that our listeners will have a clue as to what we're talking about.
Yeah. So at the end of 2021, I coined the term Blactiquing, really to reflect my passions for both being Black as well as going to antique stores and antiquing. So I define Blactiquing as the intentional act of collecting, preserving, and sharing stories, based on Black experiences from the items that I find in antique shops. And so for more than 25 years, I've been a collector of Black art, Black memorabilia being, some of those more racist or more grotesque depictions of Black people. So I collect, from the most racist to the most celebratory. And the reason why I collect them is I think that they're very much tied to my history and my heritage of my family being in this country. We trace our families back to the descendants of slaves, where my mother and father grew up in the same areas and the same lands that our forefathers were enslaved. And so having that history of being from the South, moving to Michigan, and my family also carrying some of those items with them, some of those things we would call Black memorabilia, because they found ways to celebrate those items. So that's what I do. That's my passion.
Where are you? Where was your family from? Where in the South?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So on the maternal side, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Greene County, Alabama. There we trace our family back to the lavenders. So if you know anything about me, I grow a lot of lavender out of respect for my family. I keep lavender around to think about the
My wife loves lavender.
I think that's why we're connected, Mark. There's a connection there. My father, he's from his family, my paternal side, Philadelphia, Mississippi. And so Philadelphia, Mississippi was known because of, the Freedom Summers. We know that the civil rights workers were slain right outside Philadelphia, Meridian, Mississippi. And so even with my dad, he picked cotton, as so many other relatives, and having that story of what it meant to be a Black child in the South, but also being a Black teenager coming up during the civil rights movement, where our grandparents, because of, the Ku Klux Klan and just other forms of intimidation, predominantly from their white neighbors, they weren't encouraged necessarily to go march with Martin Luther King when he came to Philadelphia. So I have all those stories that feed me.
When did your family move to Michigan? I'm assuming Detroit for the auto industry, or?
So they actually moved to Saginaw. My father moved to Saginaw in '68. He followed his older brother, and they had come because of General Motors and some of the opportunities that were here in the North. My mother and my granddad and my grandma, they moved, to Gary, Indiana, in the steel industry. And so, my dad courted my mom in Gary, and they would hang out in that area. We had family in Chicago, and somehow, they ended up, married for some years and moved to Saginaw. Wow. I eventually moved to Detroit when my parents divorced. And so, that's where my Detroit connection comes from, where I finished high school, did middle school and finished high school in Detroit.
Well, I think the interesting part about this, Mark, is that his dad and my stepfather that raised me are both from Philadelphia, Mississippi. So they're hometown guys. And so that story, it's interesting because when you look at slavery, and it seems so far and so long ago, But when you look at the fact that his dad, my dad, grew up picking cotton, and then the sugarcane fields, that history is very prevalent, and so it's really a unique experience that we were able to share, and some of the stories that he's going to tell you about today. So we now know what Blactiquing is.
Well, what's interesting is he was talking, I was thinking about, I'm a huge antiquer myself, Kevin. I've been antiquing since probably my early 20s, so about 40 years. And as we travel, I'll go.
Mark was
I'm
antiquing at 20.
Yeah.
At 20, I was.
Yeah, in my mid 20s, I'd say. But
go
anyway,
ahead. Go ahead.
Now that you mention it, I actually see very few Black people in antique stores, really. Now that as I'm thinking about it, it's rare. And most of the items you see, now that again that I'm thinking about it, are the kind of items you talked about, like the little black Sambo salt and pepper shakers, things like that.
Well, he's got some amazing things.
Yeah, I would love to see him.
Yeah, no, and he's actually brought some things with us. Why don't you give us a quick overview of what what you brought with us today? And before we take our first commercial break, we'll kind of have that out of the way, and then we'll come back and talk more in depth about those ideas.
Okay, so just quickly, I'm right outside Seattle, Washington, and one thing I've discovered of antiquing here in the United States, in different states, but also around the country, is that there is a local feel for the items that you have. And so the 3 items that I have, I believe that they are true to this area. And so we will talk about Coon Chicken Inn, a placemat, and it's actually the placemat features the Pacific Northwest. We'll also talk about a collage. And so this is probably less of an antique, but it takes articles from the Seattle Daily Times and depicts them in a particular way, and we'll discuss that. And then lastly, there is an item known as a karakuri. It's Karakuri dowel, Kobe dowels out of Kobe, Japan. And I'll talk about just their significance. So we have items that are from, here in the United States, but also items that originated in Japan, but still fitting the Blactiquing items that I look for.
All right. So share with us really quick, Kevin, what was the catalyst that when you realized, hey, I've been hit by something here that I've never heard of before, and I'm having this passion? Where did this passion derive from?
So again, the passion derives really from my family. My family taught us how to understand these stories and also how to find some celebration in them. So Mark, you talked about the little black Sambo salt and pepper shakers. My grandmother quite often read Little Black Sambo to me and my twin brother. Yeah. And I think that was a way of just kind of strengthening us around racism in this country and different words that we might hear, but also to look at those images and still find some joy in some of those aspects. So for me, that's where the bug comes from. I think the other piece is there is an urgency for me to collect these items and to encourage others. We are in a time, and this time isn't new, but we're in a time where people are banning books, where they are trying to erase certain histories. And I think it's easier to erase those histories when you can walk into an antique store and only see a certain type of thing presented. And so what I do in antique shops is I try to go on the highways and the byways of antique shops, on the high levels of the shelves to the low end. I look for those black items to try to either pull them to the front so people will buy them or purchase them myself.
There's a lot in your area. Tacoma and Olympia has quite a few antique shops as well. I don't know if you've been down there, but quick question. We got 46 seconds left. Did you start antiquing and then you evolved into Blactiquing, or you started it with this specific goal in mind?
I started collecting black pieces to resemble things that my grandmother had.
Okay.
Wow, this is going to be a great conversation, Mark. You're asking great questions. I greatly appreciate this. We will hope you guys are tuned into United Shades of Gray. If not, get your family, your play cousins, and everybody else involved. This is going to be a great conversation as we talk about how history and artifacts of history are so key to preserving the legacy of a people and a time that is easily lost. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America.
You're listening to United Shades of Grey on WSGW.
This is Kareem Bowen. We're back with our second half of United Shades of Grey. I'm here with the cast, the guys, Mark and John. Our special guest is in the studio. He is not with us in studio, but he's in our social media stream. That is Kevin Jones, the creator and the brain behind Blactiquing. Before the break, he said that we were going to have some conversations about the coon chicken in placement, the Karakubi Kobe Dow, and 1945 Seattle. Did I get it right?
That's right.
I did get it right.
Karakuri.
All right. Okay.
Karakuri.
Karakuri. Okay, those words, Karakubi, Karakubi, Kobe Down. This is like a tongue twister. And the 1940 Seattle Post collage. And so I want to turn it over to you, Mark, unless you have something that you'd like to ask starting in this out. I would just really like to hear, Kevin, why don't you begin to show us some of the things that you've brought with you and the historical perspective and what they mean and why you brought these pieces.
Okay. So when I'm in an antique shop, one of the things that I'm looking for is black. So in all the beautiful hues of black people, I'm looking at them. So even from light skin to the darkest of skin, to even what some might consider unimaginable. So you'll see here a placemat from a restaurant known as Coon Chicken Inn. So this particular restaurant, a franchise restaurant, started in 1925 here in the United States, and they had a good run for about 25 years, a little over 25 years. And you'll see this particular placemat that you would go into a restaurant, they would have a placemat that you set your plate on top, it had this depiction. And so some of us remember going to restaurants and having placemats. And this particular one is of the Pacific Northwest. And you'll see here, this is what the image looked like for the Coon Chicken Inn. Yep. And you would actually go into the entrance, and the entrance had a big shape of the face, and you would enter through the mouth to go into this restaurant. So you'll also notice, if I get a little closer, excuse the lighting, but you can see that for each of the states, they may mention some of the things they're known for. So in Seattle, you see the trolleys. They talk about some of the, Mount Rainier. In Wyoming, there's hunting. But you'll note, if you could see this, you would see that this image is on the face of the cowboy, of the ranger. And so they really did a lot of advertising and branding of this particular image. Now, the word coon is something that's considered racially offensive, and, people referring to black people as coons. And so this wasn't necessarily a term of endearment for black people. Nonetheless, between 1925 and the 50s, this was a popular chain of restaurants, similar to other restaurants that existed, like Sambo's.
KFC before KFC.
He said it was a KFC before KFC, that type of restaurant.
Yeah. And so they also encourage people to take these placemats home as a souvenir. And so I was excited to find this here in Tacoma area, because it kind of reflects, again, Pacific Northwest. And one of the other great things is I'm here with my nephews. And so I'm trying to also encourage a good sense of understanding of these items. And so we not only talked about geography by having him identify the states and point to, the different states since he lives here, but then also to talk about the imagery and why it's important for us as Black people to be able to recognize this imagery, and also understand how it affected us as in our personal lives, our personal families. So this is one of the first pieces that I found yesterday preparing for today's show, and I was very excited to get it because I don't believe
you found it just yesterday in an antique store.
Yes, I wanted to have some items here, and I don't have items. Well, actually, I do have some items here because don't want to ship them right now, but I've already shown those. So I wanted to have some new items to show. So
it's interesting. Do you mind if I ask a couple questions, Kareem?
Well, I wanted to make a note that there is one of our viewers that is out there that said that they are in, and I'll connect the two of you, but there's an estate sale that she's prepping now that has a few Blactiquing items, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks in Beaverton, Mission, I guess. She was really surprised to find so much in one home. So maybe another opportunity for you to find some great. Now that is kind of off the beaten path.
No, it's not. Ruth, please contact me. I'm excited to talk to you. I haven't been to Beaverton in a long time. I would love to come to that estate sale. I spend a lot of time in antique shops, but before
He's like,
I get the antiques.
I'll get there. But no, I wanted to make sure, and I do know Russo, so I'll make sure the two of you connect.
Please.
So, Mark, go ahead. You had some questions.
Yeah, I guess one of the number one, I really admire the way you're taking something that I think today most people, irrespective of race, would find super offensive, and trying to do something positive with it by telling a story and kind of the evolution of how things have gone. So I really admire that. I guess my question is like, what reaction do you get from, like, your Black friends and family when you are to those kind of items? Are they bothered by it initially, or what's the reaction you kind of get?
No, I think for my network, and particularly those who are Black, most of them, I understand that racism exists and that there was a history of these pieces. Unfortunately, I think that because we don't talk about them, or we don't see them in our face regularly, it's kind of like there's that shock factor.
Shock value, yeah.
But not that they're just, I don't think that, they would say they don't want them necessarily in their home, but they're glad that someone's maintaining the history. I think one of for younger generations, particularly my nephews, or, they see the items and they see fear. I think these items project or will interject certain feelings. And I think for younger people who haven't seen these and think, how can we live in a society where these types of things existed?
Right.
I think for them, it becomes like, no, that's not real. This is scary, so on and so forth. So,
and Kim,
I'm assuming it's getting harder and harder to find those things because, again, I think generally speaking, people go like, okay, this is racist, it's offensive, and they're not going to want to put them on display to sell. Like when I first started, like 20 or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I'd see those things and they interested me because I just found it like, okay, this is a moment in time and aesthetically they're interesting looking. But I thought, like, I could never buy this because if I've displayed it in my home, people are going to draw a conclusion that I'm a racist. And so I'm assuming
or
they're
a
hard to
purveyor,
sell.
Or you could just be a lover. I mean, people can be lovers of
but they're
history.
if the first time you see it, they're going to make an assumption. Is my concern.
I agree with Mark. And I think that when people say, well, these items are history, it's history. And I hear this a lot when I'm talking to, vendors of what, when we go into our conversations. And, and I never ask them this question, but sometimes I wonder, whose history are we talking about?
Right.
Are we talking about the white person that created them or the racist system behind these items? Or are we trying to figure out, for this person here, who are they thinking about? Who was the Black person that they had in mind? And so I try to figure out or try to imagine in my ancestral history, who was this person? Maybe it was my great-great-great-great-great-grandpappy was the first person they called a coon. And if that's the case, I'm going to celebrate this man here, even with these I won't call this man necessarily ugly because I know Black people with big lips. I know my grandmother had very dark skin. They called us these same words. And so when I look at this man, this image, I don't necessarily see him as unreal. I see this as a living human being that's deserving of love and respect that he likely didn't get. And so also in the antique shops, you'll quite often see me, if I'm there, I'll find a Black dowel. Usually they only bring the Black dowels out in Black History Month. Otherwise, they're like not really out.
Now that you mentioned it, I don't recall ever seeing a Black doll.
I want you to expound on that. You said you only bring it out during Black History Month.
Well, sometimes some of the vendors, it's harder to find. And so, around different seasons, first of all, this is capitalism. So people are selling, and at certain points of the year, we know that there are certain things that people sell. So around Christmas time or December, people put up Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Black History Month, that's what my gold mine days. Sometimes the prices go up that month on these items because they're harder to find. But often, if I find a Black dowel, I'm usually walking around cradling. I don't have any kids, but I often feel like these Black dowels have not been cradled. They haven't been touched. They haven't been loved on in probably a lot of years, especially if they only come out during Black History Month. So I try to, breathe some life into
them. Kevin, do you go on eBay and looking for your items at all? I mean, it's a huge virtual marketplace.
So I have in the past, but I've actually stopped.
Okay.
So one, because eBay now has a lot of their discretionary rules around what you're allowed to sell. So you won't find necessarily a category of Black memorabilia on eBay. And so a lot of those items are now being sold under the category of African art. But I'm sure they'll pull those soon because of censorship. There are a number of Facebook groups that I'm a part of where we kind of talk about prices. Yeah. Those, in my opinion, are really kind of there to kind of build the value or establish a base for the value of these items. And so I don't want to necessarily play that game because that's not the reason I collect them. I have gone on some of the live auctions, but I'm also paying such a large surcharge for some of the items that, I'm not certain for me and what I'm trying to do if it's worth it.
Yep.
One of the things that I know that you do is you take these items that you're working with and you use these as educational points for young people. And I've seen you do it not only for young people, but for professional individuals. And when you talk to young people, this is something that I'm wondering about, is that when you talk to young people and you show them some of these things, such as the map that you just displayed, do you find that there is a real disconnect for the younger generations for the types of things that you're finding? People of our generation, we're kind of like, we know this happened. Yep. And we enjoy it and we can, take a look at it. But do you find that the younger generations of young Black people are kind of like surprised that these things actually exist? And what do you tend to think is their takeaway when they see these things?
Yeah. So I do think there's an element of surprise that these items exist. And I think it's because they're not in my everyday purview. So I don't see them every day. Maybe I've heard that people were in blackface. Maybe I saw a Spike Lee movie, but do people really do that to this day? And so I think there is that shock value. Sometimes I'll ask people with young people, especially during COVID, there were a number of designers who made Black masks and put bright red lips on them.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I didn't see
yeah.
that.
Of a very popular designer who we won't talk about his name on here, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And they had to recall the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you ask people about, some of those experiences, I think we can have that conversation. So even with young people, often what I would try to do is, even what I did with my nephew, I have a degree in education, so I try to use it when I can. But I try to bring people into an educational process by first asking them, what do you see from a non-judgmental perspective? Just what do you see? What's on this map? And so I said, let's start with the states. Which states do you see? So we can focus on some of the things that are familiar and then bring them into, now what do you also do? What are the faces on there? Why do you think those exist that way? And so then we're able to have a conversation that I try to base it on their experience. So it's not something that's so foreign to them, so we can remove some of the shock factor. But that's what I try to do. I don't know if I'm always successful. I think some walk away. One of my younger nephews commented, I love him. He's 6 years old. And he's like, I'm going to be an artist. I was like, that's great, because we're talking about some of the art pieces here and how people can create art. And so what I'm hoping is that in this conversation of even trying to interject history, interject culture, interject professional roles or whatever, that young people can just find a way, but use this. I'm trying to use this as the key to the avenue. I thought that's what my grandmother did with us, with me and with my siblings, by showing us or having the books in the house. But to say that you could actually design that placemat, not necessarily, you could be the artist behind it, So I'm hoping that that's some of the ways that some of the messages that young people take away when they see the items or when they're presented to them.
Do you display, I have quite a few different kinds of collections, but as I was thinking about it on the way over here, since I knew we were going to be talking about this, really they're all about, I get personal enjoyment out of them. I have a huge vinyl record collection. I love music, and I have a certain time period I like to collect in, 50s and 60s, and they bring me joy. I just like looking at them. They make me happy. You're doing it for a somewhat different reason, but do you display any of the pieces in your own home? And what are your favorite pieces if you do?
Yeah, so I do display
really for educational purposes.
I do display the items in my home more for entertainment, and part of this started because COVID, and I had to have a Zoom background because people were sick of seeing my white walls and they were commenting on my white walls, and so I said, okay, I'm going to put up a gallery style wall of Black memorabilia on my walls and see.
You got the most interesting background of anybody.
I don't know who you're working with, but how uncomfortable did that make them feel? So,
that wasn't my issue in terms of their comfort, because no one asked me how I feel about the red plant in the background matching.
Sure.
The red plant next to the yellow curtains next to the polka dot.
I'm offended. It doesn't blend.
It's an aesthetic issue, but it has led to a lot of conversations. I think my favorite pieces, I think that my favorite pieces are my dowels. And I think the dowels are my favorite because of the stories that my mother tells. My mother was a dowel collector. And as a dowel collector, I always thought when my mom would share the story about being a dowel collector that she just had umpteen black dowels. She only had one black dowel. And at the end,
they're hard to come by.
They're hard to come by. You know, cultural says who will want a black dowel. I think there are a lot of people who want black dowels, and so I have dowels displayed. I'm also an openly gay man who was told in my elementary school that I wasn't allowed to play with dowels. So dowels represent rebellion to me as well. And so when I go into an antique shop and I'm looking for these dowels, sometimes I describe myself as the Harriet Tubman of the antiques, because I'm going through trying to rescue these items.
Kevin, set them free.
Do you have any Christmas decorations out of curiosity? Because I'm a big Christmas collector.
I found this jerk. So this was just last week, maybe 2 weeks. I was in Pennsylvania, and I found a German black Santa Claus Christmas, like a stand for a Christmas tree. The base for a Christmas tree, that's a black Santa. I have photos of black Santas, but I also just found, and I'm going to call him black, but I'm going to call this elf on the shelf that I found yesterday my first black elf on the shelf. So I'm adding him to the Black Christmas collection as well.
Yeah. Empire made a black Santa blow mold about 40 inches tall. I don't know if you knew that, but it's pretty cool, actually.
Really? You know what we did? My grandmother, this is funny because my grandmother was an angel collector. And Kev, you knew my grandmother. So she would go around and she would buy angels that she liked. She would actually go and paint the face black. She would paint paint the angels black, and she would have them on her tree. That was something that she loved to do. But I think it goes back to what you were saying about that black dowel. And Kevin, it was funny because when you hugged the black dowel, for me, what I saw was this was something that we never saw, first of all, because Barbie didn't get black until almost we were teenagers. And the fact that the black dowels never got played with. And when you said that, that was a powerful point. Nobody wants a black dowel. How do young black girls?
Did Cabbage Patch have a black Cabbage Patch?
I mean, they did have a little black Cabbage Patch, but Cabbage Patch dowels smell like skunks to me for some reason. I mean, when Kim get that dowel away, it smells like a skunk. But it goes back to the point that black dowels didn't get played with. What mental toll does that take on young black girls that nobody wanted to play with the black? First of all, you couldn't get one, and then nobody wanted to play with the black dowel. They all wanted the blonde hair dowel with the long hair because she came with a car and she came with a house. And when you think about that, that's what I saw when I saw you give that big hug to that dowel.
Yeah, and so there have been sociological studies that have given children dowels, either white dowel or black dowel, and ask them which dowel they prefer, or which dowel is more scary. And we, see over time for some of those studies that, people, as Kareem indicated, that people chose the white dowel. I don't want to say that people don't play with black dowels, because there were families that created black dowels. We had, this is more of a recreation, but we had black vintage dowels like this that, my grandmother was domestic. My great grandmother would take scraps of clothes and they would make these rag dowels that, in brown skin, with dark skin. So people were making black dowels for their children. They had the materials. If you cut open some of the dowels, you'll see either hair or you'll see different things that they use to stuff them. So there was a market for black dowels. People just didn't care about the market for black dowels, or for black dowel owners.
Is there anything in particular you're looking for, like you're on the hunt for? Because there's always something I'm on the hunt for. I was just curious.
There is, and I'm so afraid. So there were two items, and Black Santa was one of them.
Black Santa.
Black Santa. I'm always
I'm going to help you look for that.
And so I now replaced Black Santa with another one I'll mention, because usually I don't tell people what I'm looking for, because I feel like I may not find it, or you'll go look for it and keep it. But that's a whole nother issue.
Do you mind if I found it and texted you like, hey, I found this. Are you interested?
And people do that. I love the scouts. I call them the scouts, and I appreciate folks doing that. But even before the movie came out, I was looking for a green book. My grandmother, my family's from the South, so they often talked about driving from the South to the North, and how there were certain places they could stay and certain places, they couldn't. And so having those guides that community members put together and say, hey, we need to publish this guide so that Black people know how to come here and be safe, or how to even spend their money in a place, where we'll accept it and receive it. So I'm often looking for green books.
And so the green book is put together by Black people telling people how to get from the South to the North.
Not always Black people.
Okay.
It wasn't always Black people, because we live in a capitalistic society. So,
right.
if I know there's money out there, the wise person would say, hey, let's help these people spend this money. If you're, leaving capitalism.
Got it. It's called a green book, though.
It's called a green book.
Yeah.
Yes, a great movie about it as well. It came out, but since that movie came out, they disappeared from the shelves. There's a great market for Black memorabilia, especially in this area in Washington. The other thing that I'm always looking for are Black Jesuses. I have about 3 depictions of a Black Jesus, and so I'm always looking for more.
Black Jesus. It makes me think of First Sunday. But this is what I want to ask. As we kind of close out on this, we only got a few minutes left.
I want to show 2 more items, though.
Okay, yeah. Show us those 2 items.
We only got through one. The conversation's been so great. We've only gotten through one.
I want to talk about your hope for these items and where they might ultimately end. But go ahead.
So my hope, and quickly, is that items such as these, or the Karakuri dowel that was made in Japan, or any of these items that you might see back here, that they will one day be in a museum or cultural institution. So that is one of my next steps. I haven't shared with many people, but I'm also working on a traveling gallery of sorts. And so imagine a 8.5 by 24-foot trailer that travels the country, and not only provides an opportunity at schools and business for people to check out these items, but if you see it in front of an antique store, I might be filming an episode of Blactiquing Street Show. I won't use the other name because it's a great show. But but a traveling. I'm really thinking about a traveling gallery of sorts, because there are a number of schools, there are a number of places where travel is still a barrier, and so being able to bring these pieces to people, I think will benefit them. And I think part of the reason I want even people to see that there's a lot of things that you can do with these art pieces. This piece features articles from 1945. Here from the Seattle Daily Times, and we know that in 1945 World War II was ending, so a lot of the headlines were about the war and what was happening. But what I love here is this Black woman, and and she's sweeping something under the rug. So you have this notion of propaganda. You have this notion of this Black woman saying, "This ain't got nothing to do with me. This war." Or just all these different things you can think of. I also think about the fact my grandmother was a domestic, especially during this time, and she moved to New England as my granddad went to fight in World War II, and cleaned up in people's homes, worked in hospitals, cleaning up behind people. And so, I think about my grandmother as a domestic, and this time period. So very excited to have this.
So Kev, how can people get in touch with you? We got 1 minute left. How can
Thank you so much? You look for Blactiquing on social media. You will find me on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. You can also come to my personal Facebook page, Kevin T. Jones, T as in Tom. Middle name is not Tom, but K.T. Jones. And would love to answer any questions. Love to accept anything that your grandmother no longer wants. So get in touch.
All right, Kev, we certainly want to thank you for this very educational opportunity. There's definitely a synergy in the room. I can't wait till you and Mark have the opportunity to talk about these things.
I'm going to have Kevin over to my house so I can show him my collection.
He's got collections that you'd absolutely love. But we want to thank you guys that are listening out there for continually tuning into the show. Thank you, Joliet, Chicago, and the Michigan Bay region for being a part of United Shades of Gray Weekly. We thank you. And as always, we want to say thank you. God bless yourselves. Take care of each other. Grace and peace.